I do have Strange Journey Redux or whatever it ended up being called,
Mm-hmm.
but I have not got around to it. I just don't use the 3DS that often
And that's
to
fair.
like feel confident about starting an RPG. As a problem is like they were like under £4 each, or so I was just like,
Yes.
screw it, I may as
And
well just buy
and
them.
Strange Journey Redux is really good. It is also a mapping style RPG, but not
Mm.
quite Etrian, more like, classical RPGs, like dungeon crawling RPGs.
Yeah.
Um, and then SMT5 is much more modern, Unreal Engine open world, but still taking a lot of that.
I'm still trying to pin down something. I mean, we've got some things that James offered as suggestions in the back pocket, but I've still been trying to pin down a sort of pertinent music for closing this week.
Mm.
So I don't know whether you've got any SMT suggestions. I mean, we had an SMT3 request a while ago that used when Nocturne was coming
Yeah.
out, I think, for it.
Um,
So
I'll think about it during the call.
I've lost track of it. Yeah,
Um, all right, we are live. Are you ready to get started?
I am. Yes.
Okay, so on the stream right now, here are our averages thus far, which I've been calculating.
Previously.
Yes, calculating in real time. 1985, a real rough one, where there were two releases and you gave them both a 4. Um, whereas 1994 didn't have anything below a 3 or below a 5 except for one game, and it had a 10. So it is our highest so far with a 6.7 average.
Yeah, definitely some of that Super Nintendo kind of
Yep.
era. I don't know whether it's because the review most of those games I probably if I didn't play them I saw them reviewed and review scores probably skewed higher back then.
Yes,
So there's
it's true.
probably a bit of that in play as well. I'd love to think I was exquisitely impartial, but
All
very
right.
much not.
Well, let's take a look at 1995. Beginning
Begin.
with Wario's Woods for the NES. Now, keep in mind, the previous year you gave Wario's Woods for the Super Nintendo a 6.
Yeah, I don't know that I can go anywhere other than that. Again, everything I said for that still stands in terms of it's one of
Okay.
these things that, especially because it is on NSO, the NES version is
Yes.
on NSO, isn't it? And it is one of those things, it's like the NSO should be good for getting me to mess around with like a game like that I would not have purchased separately, but and I have done with some, but not that one. So I'm still going to give it the sort of somewhat of the benefit of the doubt with the 6. But who knows? I mean, I might like it better than that if I ever did play it.
Yes, and they don't ever put the SNES version of Wario's Woods back out. Just the NES. Um,
Yep.
Probably because it's a bookend to the generation, if I had to guess. In 1993, oh, whoa, I got. Hang on, let me turn on. Can I turn on Do Not Disturb? Is that a thing? No, that's unfortunate. Sorry, I got an email notification. Um, all right. In 1993, you gave Tetris 2 an 8 on NES. In 1994, you gave Tetris 2 an 8 on Game Boy. In 1995, what do you give Tetris 2 on Super NES?
I think for virtue of not being portable and being longer in the tooth, I'm gonna go with 7.
Okay.
It's probably again no experience with it,
I
so
just. Yeah.
I'm just guessing like a sort of bit of depreciation but I wouldn't have applied that to the Game Boy gate because
Mm-hmm.
the portable Tetris is always a good mix.
But, like, I just cannot believe that Europe split Tetris 2 across 3 consecutive years.
Yeah, that is. I mean, it was a big thing. Like, as we touched on this before, the way they would call things that have nothing to do with Tetris. That it was this brand that he just wanted to have out there regularly,
Mm-hmm.
evidently.
Kirby's Dream Course
Yeah, I like this one. Yeah, I played it years later. Didn't have it at the time. I saw it covered, but I hadn't played any Kirby games. So even though it was kind of intriguing, because having kind of liked more conventional golf games, I do this sort of sort of miniature golf, but with like all video gamey kind of elements and these Kirby elements and stuff. It was a kind of curiosity, but having played it years later, I think it's solid enough as a kind of miniature golf game, but then also has these nice Kirby trappings to it as well. So
Mm-hmm.
go with eat up on that one.
Okay. Super Punch Out.
Back then, but by virtue of a rental in the end, it was another one of the. It wasn't that warmly reviewed when at least in the publications I saw at the time, because it was kind of like, okay, well, it's much closer to the kind of arcade game now and all this, but it's like, isn't this? Haven't we moved past this kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Attitude with some reviewers and all that. But of course, we love Punch Out, so it was always like, well, I'm going to pay the big money to get it as a a brand new game when it came out. But after we had the converter that could run the PAL games at the proper speed on our Super Famicom, and therefore you could there was the opportunity to rent games locally. Punch Out was, I think, one of the first ones we did that with, and I didn't quite finish it on the rental. I got pretty far. I think I got to like the first of the Bruiser brothers or whoever.
Oh,
at
yep.
the end, the very Chowaniki looking people. But that sort of are the final bosses there. But I of course I've played it years later. We did a retroactive and all that. It's very good. It kind of melds together the arcade games and the NES game. Still leaning a bit towards the arcade game in some ways, but I think an 8 would be appropriate for it.
Okay. European exclusive name, Kirby's Ghost Trap.
Yeah, so this is Puyo. Is this the Puyo one?
Kirby's maybe.
Because the thing is, like, there's another Kirby puzzle game from the time, the Star Stacker. That's
yes.
Not Puyo.
This is Avalanche the Puyo.
Yeah, so I think this was the European name for Avalanche, which was the Puyo game. Yeah,
Kirby's Ghost Trap.
Yeah, and of course, around about the same time, the Mean Bean Machine was the Puyo,
Yep.
name for Genesis, with the Robotnik sort of skin
Yep.
or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I played some Puyo over the years. I quite like it, but I'm not crazy about it. I've no particular knowledge of this version, to be honest. The name is, but I'll give it a 7.
Killer Instinct for the Super Nintendo, but the unplayable version.
Yeah, this 50 hertz version definitely is one where we have to sort of see. I'm sure we could talk about some of the others, like maybe Super Punch Out or something. It probably would have affected it again, even though I actually rented a PAL version. I got to play it at full speed, but with Killer Instinct, it was just really quite well documented. I had the North American version on Super Nintendo, and I quite enjoyed it. I mean, having had Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat 2 on Super Nintendo, it was a little bit of a luxury in some ways, and it is like it's kind of a mix of the it very much is just like, okay, let's kind of graft bits of those two very popular fighting games together. Like, I think some characters, I think Spinal, the Skeleton Knight or whatever, like he is a sort of tap style input character, like a Mortal Kombat character, whereas a lot of the other ones are more the kind of quarter circles and so forth of a Street Fighter character.
Yep.
So it is just this. It's not the most coherent. It's quite Me Too, kind of like, yes, all these other fighting games are big at the moment. We can do that and do some pre-rendered stuff and all that. But yeah, so I mean, I kind of like it, but I liked it, but didn't love it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then you factor in some of this 60 hertz stuff, well, going from 60 to 50. Where I think the real problem was that they may have, again, it was written about in some of the magazines at the time. Specifically, Super Play talked about it back then, and the impression that I was left with, this is 20 some odd old year information is could be a bit sketchy, but I think they tried to correct for the speed a bit, but then that meant frames were getting skipped, and then that just screwed up the timing of the combos.
There's frame skipping. Yes.
Yeah, so basically, I think, like, if I was just scoring the game the way I played it, it might be like a 7, maybe 7.5 kind of territory. But for this, I'd go for 5.
Okay, that makes sense. Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island.
Yeah, so I had this. Basically, it was the last kind of Super Famicom game I had, like, as the sort of big new purchase before the N64 came along, which was a big gap. Like, it was like Christmas of '95, and then I didn't get the N64 until August of '96, which obviously was well ahead of its European release date, but still, it's a long time between like genuinely new games. But it was kind of eased by the fact that, as I said just then, by this time you could kind of rent some games, or we had the Mega Drive at that point and stuff. So it wasn't like it was literally not playing any games between that and Mario 64. But it as it has that kind of milestone place. It's kind of special game in that sense, and I really enjoyed it at the time. It was kind of nice to see. I always had a soft spot for Yoshi, and it was kind of nice to see him getting the spotlight in a game that wasn't just like a completely nothing to do with what Yoshi actually was. Like,
you mean like a shooter or a puzzle game?
Yeah, exactly. It was nice to see him getting something so kind of mainstream. The way it was, of course, like in Japan, it wasn't called Super Mario World 2. It was just Yoshi Island or whatever, But in elsewhere, they positioned it that way, and so it kind of felt, oh, wow, he's like the star now. They love Yoshi too.
Yeah, and they also hate crying babies.
Yeah.
The audio mixing to me, I can never get over.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of things there, isn't there? Just in terms of, first of all, the way it is. I mean, the volume it is. But also, I don't know. I always think with some of those things, like, could we have it where it sort of happens like a certain percentage of the time or something, rather than like absolutely every single time. Like in fighting games or various other things where people like call out their attacks or something. It's just like, does it have to be every time? That's always my sort of feeling.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was something that kind of had a lot to live up to, to some extent, when you put that moniker of it as Super Mario World 2, and it doesn't like really kind of, I feel it is a misnomer because it's so kind of, it is not the most linear thing in some ways, because you have these quite open levels with lots of coins and flowers and stuff to find, but in terms of like secret exits and the world map and all that, because none of that's there. It's just one level to the next, and you can unlock some secret ones by scoring well, or scoring perfectly, I should say. And that really is, I think, the major criticism that I've always felt was kind of valid about the Yoshi's Island template, is that it has this scoring system where it's just kind of, oh well, if you get to the end of the level, that's pretty easy, but that's not everything, which is sort of, I guess it was a somewhat progressive idea at the time, but what it didn't do was find a way to incentivize you to sort of play well if you weren't playing perfectly.
Yep.
It was all or nothing. It's just like, well, look, if you score a perfect, the 100 score, then eventually you'll unlock some more levels, which are incredibly difficult relative to the rest of the game. But that was it. There wasn't another sort of encouragement. And then there's little granular things like, does it bank this level of achievement, like for the flowers separate from the coins, or so these other things. So there was definitely things even back at the time that you kind of felt like they could have been done better. But I have to say, it was one of those that really impressed. I think much more so than say DKC did. Back then, when you looked at something longingly in a magazine in screenshots for so long, there was an anticipation of what it was actually going to look like in motion.
Mm-hmm.
And Yoshi's Island is so much more vivid and great in motion.
Sure is.
Compared to how it is in screenshots. So I think it did impress a hell of a lot on that scale. So I think hardly perfect, but a kind of landmark title and lots of great artistry in it. I'll give it a 9.
Okay. Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest.
Yes. So this wasn't going to happen, basically. Having had DKC the previous year and getting Yoshi's Island that year, this, even though looking at the reviews and stuff, it kind of seemed like, yeah, this might actually be obviously, but fundamentally very similar, and the graphics, because be quite impressive in a similar way. But maybe the bosses are better and all this, but you can't have it. So it had to be down to Virtual Console years later, and it did end up being. I felt like it was somewhat more interesting from a level design standpoint and stuff. And they did some more things with the overworld map, and not all of them I was crazy about. But, of course, the music is still fantastic. Probably the thing that holds up the best out of over time. But even I believe I gave DKC an 8.
You gave DKC an 8.
Yeah, I would give this an 8 also. Even though it's just basically it's kind of down from DKC in that it lacked the impact that made with the novelty of the graphics, but then it's up because I do think it's a kind of better designed game, but that leaves you at the same place.
Illusion of Gaia.
Yeah, heard about this, but didn't really ever get to play it. Certainly heard a lot of sort of good things. And again, it's kind of one of the so many things didn't come over with we did mention Secret of Mana in a previous year, which was something that Nintendo in Europe did bring over.
Yep.
But a lot of other stuff that America got, whether it was through Nintendo or not, Nintendo didn't bring it over in Europe, or didn't get brought over at all. But this one is one of the ones that sort of intrigued, but again, just kind of wasn't really in my range, and I've never had the chance to play it since, because I'm not sure what the re-release sort of history of this is at all.
Barely ever.
Yeah, so that's a shame to me. It seems like something that, could this not be like an NSO game or something? If
I mean, they don't like giving out super long games.
Yeah, true. It's just a shame. I really have very little to go on other than sort of vague perceptions of warm feelings, but I'll give it an 8 on that basis.
Yeah, this was published in the West by Nintendo and Japan by Enix. Square Enix maintains the rights. Never been re-released.
Not at all. Wow, that's kind of, because they're not averse to a re-release.
No, it doesn't look like it is.
That is something, but I don't know what that says about the idea that there's just nobody in the company to advocate for it being re-released or something. But it seems like a shame.
Also the Enix side of things is woefully underrepresented by modern Square Enix, unless you're Dragon Quest.
Yeah, I guess so. Certainly just as a broader pattern, it does kind of seem that way anyway. Yeah, so
yes,
shame. But right now, you're gonna have to help me with this. The Kid Clown in Crazy Chase.
Okay, with 2 Ks and 2 Cs, because they knew enough not to have more than 2 Ks.
Yeah, fair.
They knew not to call their product 3 or 4 Ks in a row, but didn't want to do Sid Clown. So here we are. There's a screenshot in chat that GX posted that'll tell you everything you need to know.
Okay, let's bring it up. It is ringing a little bit of a bell. Looking at it, I feel like it probably did see some amount of.
It's an isometric platformer.
So yeah, who made this? I guess that begs the question: is it somebody European or what?
Let me check.
I mean, it's a Chemco game, but they sometimes licensed games from
Yeah.
developers who
No,
were
they
based
made
outside
it.
of Japan.
They made it.
Oh well, and it apparently had a Japan exclusive sequel on PlayStation as well. So there you go.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm not big fan that. I mean, there's some sort of formats where an isometric action game can work, but I'm not generally given to that style of game. So, yeah,
It did
I'm
get a
not.
GBA remake.
Oh, that sounds terrible. You reduce visible sort of. I mean, it
Yeah.
depends how they did it. To be fair,
No, it's probably terrible.
I'm presuming that they just kind
Yes.
of didn't really redraw the graphics and just
Yeah.
gave you a
Oh yeah.
small
No,
kind of-
it's a mediocre Super Nintendo platformer that got ported to a portable, quote unquote, portable Super Nintendo. They probably didn't give a fuck.
Yeah, so I mean that probably is worse again. I'm gonna go with a 5. It's just I
Okay.
do feel like this got some coverage back then, but probably Chemco games didn't get a lot, so it was
Yes.
probably kind of slight.
And then last Super Nintendo game for the year, Lufia. What a
Yeah.
fucking banger year for Super Nintendo. Jesus Christ.
So the original Luffy, I'm kind of surprised. I wasn't. If you just asked me point blank, like, did the Lufia come out in Europe at all? I wouldn't have known what to say. I would have been like, maybe not, but because I don't recall reading about it a great deal. But and even if I had, that might have been import coverage, because of course, I read about that a lot, because it was very central to my interests. So yeah, it's. I mean, I know Lufia 2 is James sort of the game that James likes a lot, isn't it? That is a prequel to this game.
Yes. Well, no.
Or
This is Lufia 2. That they called Lufia because the first one never came out. So, reading a reading from Wikipedia, notably, it ends partly with events that begin the first Lufia, making the first game's introduction a spoiler for the second game's existence. It was released in Europe as simply Lufia because Lufia and the Fortress of Doom was not released in Europe. This often causes confusion.
Well, yeah, that is bloody confusing. I mean, but it makes sense. I mean, look, obviously there were some really, really heavy delays.
Yes.
But the original Lufia was a few years before this, right? Like
Yep.
In America, so it would have been coming late if it was the original Lufia. But that just kind of make a bit more sense.
Yeah,
but
Lufia.
This is very well thought of. But I've not had the. I know there was a remake, but it was quite different on DS. Like it was more like actiony and stuff. So. Yeah, I didn't ever quite. I mean, I thought about playing that, but again, this has not been heavily re-released or anything, has it? So I've not
Not
had
that much.
the opportunity. I'll give it an 8, which is, I could be doing it a minor disservice. I don't know, but that's what I'm comfortable with.
And now we have our first Game & Watch collection.
Yay!
This one is for Game Boy. It's called Game Boy Gallery. It does not have any Mario theming. And it contains Ball, Vermin, Flagman, Manhole, and Cement Factory.
I like the way that it's Ball and Vermin. So that suggests that the next one in the sequence, which was Flagman?
Yep.
That will be the game on the next Game & Watch thing that they release. They're clearly working in that scene.
Oh, yes.
Like the passenger list in Final Destination or some shit, right? Like this is the spoiler for the rest of the movie. Like,
yes.
Yeah. So I mean, I haven't played this one. I played the first one where you get to the Mario theming and stuff. But yeah, I mean, hard to say.
There's some screenshots in the chat for what it's worth.
hard to say how sort of. Oh, I see. Yeah, so the way they kind of adapted the. I'm gonna go with the 5. I think
Okay.
they're probably just not enough unique
A
games
one a
there.
one for each game. I see. Um, Wario Blast featuring Bomberman.
Yeah, this is a weird one, isn't it? I
Mm-hmm.
remember, reading about this, being confused, exactly what was going on there in terms of just like why are we selling Bomberman with Wario? Like, I know he was kind of. Yeah, they put him to use in quite a lot of weird ways quite quickly in retrospect,
Yeah, he
like
used bombs in Wario Land 1, right?
I've tried. Yeah, it's been a few years
Or in
since.
Wario's Woods. Like, there's like him plus bombs. I don't think this was the first connection.
Yeah, it's true. And then he's always like blowing himself up in like Mario Sports
Yep.
intros that would come in years later. Yeah, I mean, no experience with this particular version, but generally speaking, even though I've not played them a hell of a lot, it's usually been like somebody else has got a Bomberman and I played it multiplayer. Like a friend of mine had one of the Mega Drive Bomberman games back in the day, and that was fun. And the GBA sort of launch period to play Bomberman and stuff. I really quite liked it. So I don't know. Surely you didn't mess up Bomberman too much, right?
Not
Like,
really, but it's also on the Game Boy.
yeah, which it's
It
still portable Bomberman's kind of like a decent fit, but that play area issue.
it's a play area issue. It's the contrast issue, and it's the complications of multiplayer.
Yeah.
GX is saying that it did support Game Boy Player.
Oh, the
Or
Super
Super
Game
Game Boy,
Boy.
yes.
Yeah,
Game Boy
it had
Player
the
was GameCube, but yes.
yeah, but which didn't really. There was some like special things, but yeah, it was like the Super Game Boy tended to have more interesting like special features, didn't it? Yeah, with the
Yeah.
borders and
Mm-hmm.
sound and all sorts of things. But perhaps a 6 for this one.
Okay. Nintendo's first localized one, Mario's Picross for Game Boy.
Yeah, so yeah, I came to enjoy Picross very very much in the DS era, and yeah, I still sort of go back to some version of it here or there. Most recently, it's probably been still doing some of the puzzles in the Super Famicom one that they
Mm-hmm.
put on NSO. I should do the Sega one
It's
at some
good.
point.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, that'll probably be the next one I get when I've like wrung the last bit of use out of that Super Famicom one. So yeah, I've got to think. Obviously, Game Boy comes with some limitations. I would have thought in terms of the playing it sort of like the size of the puzzles and stuff, like doing it well. I don't know if that was an issue at all or whether they sort of managed it. Um, but I can't imagine there's much to go wrong here, so I'll give it a 7.
Kirby's Dream Land 2.
Yeah, so I played this on Virtual Console. Like I said, it wasn't the first Kirby game that I kind of got into, but it was kind of once I'd played Kirby's Adventure for NES, it was kind of the next one I went to. And this is the one that introduces the Animal Pals. It's obviously being a Game Boy game,
Mm-hmm.
especially because like Kirby's Adventure was such a kind of ambitious and impressive NES game. It wasn't just any NES game. It's kind of like
Yes.
one of the apex of the NES in some ways. Like this Game Boy game is something of a step back, but it is also a significant step forward from the first Dreamland. Because it's porting back the sort of the absorption powers from Adventure into the Game Boy setting, and it's adding the Animal Pals, and it's kind of got this sort of thing about like it's got like a trick ending to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. It's kind of got, well, there's just we're seeing the end of the game, but then if you do it properly, like there's a real ending and stuff. So it's pretty. I think it's really obvious. You're getting fairly deep into the Game Boy's life here. But I think it still was impressive for what a Game Boy game could do. I'll go with a 7.
Okay. Yeah, in Japan and the US at this point, we are at the end of the first life cycle of the Game Boy.
Yeah,
Because
it's
Pokemon
true.
is 96.
The Pocket, I guess, was like this year in
Mm-hmm.
at least some territories, wasn't it? I feel like, Dear Donkey Kong Land is next
Oh,
now.
okay. So we're gonna
Mm,
have fun with all the rest of these on the list. So, Donkey Kong Land is the Game Boy version of Donkey Kong Country 1. Now, there are also there's also Game Boy Color versions that are different and Game Boy Advance versions that are different. So there are 3 different eras of ports of the Donkey Kong Country games, but this one specifically is the Game Boy Black and White Donkey Kong Land.
I guess it was one of these things where it was just like too much to turn down in terms of like DKC was such a hit, but it's like, oh, but there's some kids out there that will hear about this and want it, but they don't have that. They have a Game Boy, and let's give it to them, But
Mm-hmm.
I always just thought it was a bizarre, terrible fit. Like, I mean, I haven't played these. They were on Virtual Console, I believe, the Game Boy monochrome ones.
Um,
Anyway,
I think it may have been just there's just so many versions. I assume that they were either all on or just the Game Boy Color ones were. So if I'm going to search Donkey Kong Land, was this on? Yes, these were on 3DS in 2014.
yeah, I never did. They didn't look appealing enough for me to actually play it. It would have been strictly out of curiosity because, of course, like I said, they are. I think they did. They weren't just like, oh, hey, just play exactly the same game with a smaller player viewing area.
Yeah, there's a
Because I think
screenshot that tells the whole story in the chat.
it was one of these things where I think there were a certain amount of kind of changes to level designs and things to try and make it, because DKC felt pretty cramped on Super Nintendo, didn't
It
it?
sure did.
That was one of the pre-rendered style and the way Rare designed the levels. Like, it is, it's one of the kind of things that just like always struck me as like a step forward. Not a moment like too soon or anything.
Mm-hmm.
With like oh goodness, that were retro developed DKC Returns and Tropical
Mm-hmm.
Freeze, because it's like, well, you with the widescreen and all this kind of, it just feels like the pace of the game fits the play area better. But to put it on Game Boy, and to like you're taking these little sort of animated gifs of renders and putting them in monochrome, and it just seems like a terrible idea to me. I mean, they might be sort of, if you try and divorce it from all context, maybe they're like somewhat fun platformers relative to other Game Boy games at the time, but more as a concept than anything else, I'm gonna give it a 4.
Okay. Alright, these next 4 are the funniest. These are exactly what they sound like, and these are full price. Arcade Classics, Asteroids, and Missile Command.
Yeah, I mean, there was this tended to happen every so often with Game Boy, didn't it? That you got like they sort of trot out the oldies.
But
Like, I think
Nintendo published all 4 of these in 1 year.
that is the weird part, isn't it? It's just like, why? Does this have anything to do with like the Pocket coming? It seems like the kind of thing you do when there's the hardware.
I don't think so.
But even if the models,
Yeah.
the platform's not new.
They did this in America too. Well, actually, no. I think one of them they didn't do in America, but like I think they published 3 of the 4 in America, but they published all 4 in Europe. So do you want to pay? I don't know, what was the going price of Game Boy games at the time? Like probably like 20 quid.
Maybe I didn't have one at the time.
Yeah.
I can't tell you for sure. I'm gonna guess it was somewhere in that range.
Like I'm trying to think. You want to drop that on like Kirby's Dream Land, or do you want to drop it on Asteroids and Missile Command?
Yeah. So I think I think this. I mean, I've played a certain amount of Asteroids. I've got to worry about the viewing area and all that again. I mean, how they adapted these things. Even though with very old arcade games, it didn't mean that they were necessarily that easy to adapt to the
Yeah.
very low resolution of the Game Boy either. So, I mean, it's obviously not a lot to go on, but I think probably another 4.
Arcade Classics 2, Centipede and Millipede.
Oh, country and western. Yeah, well, that's where we are.
This one is the most what. This and the next one are the most. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, just like such the same flavor. It's yeah, for less variety, I think let's go with a 3.
All right. What about the sequel, Arcade Classics 3, Galaga and Galaxian?
Well, the variety is still a problem, but I do like Galaga probably better than Centipede.
I mean, yes.
But we'll bump it up to a 4, sort of, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and then the two games most likely to have difficulty converting to Game Boy, Arcade Classics 4, Joust and Defender.
Yeah, let's just go back to a 3.
I'm thinking Defender on the small screen. No.
Yeah, it's that's so strange. That really is bizarre. To be
Yes.
honest, where that came from.
If you want to laugh, you should look up Killer Instinct on Game Boy.
Well, yeah. So this is, I mean, one thing you can say about this is that you wouldn't have had the 60 hertz, 50 hertz problem.
No, you wouldn't have had 50 hertz, 60 hertz. You would have had 10 hertz, 15 hertz. Sorry about that Game Boy, but like, here's the thing. Like, let's just talk about these as a pair. Killer Instinct and Street Fighter 2, Nintendo published both of those back to back in Europe on Game Boy.
So I remember also there was like Mortal Kombat. I don't know whether it was 1 or 2 or whatever version. Like also got on Game Boy. Like there was, it was definitely a strange period where you went from like these fighting games are so violent and all that to like can we get them on Game Boy?
Yep.
Like, it just in a matter of like a year or something. So
Yes.
It was again. I did see this covered, and I just thought like. What? Like, really?
Yeah.
I always kind of felt like, in a way, as well, as much as, however, like, wrong-headed it was in terms of the actual product itself, I was kind of surprised that Nintendo would do it based on the fact that doesn't it kind of, like, undercut some of the flim-flam that they were trying to peddle with, like, DKC... Killer Instinct, whatever. It's so advanced, that only the Super Nintendo could do it. But here's the Game Boy version. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think it was worth the whatever payoff of little brothers and sisters getting the version of the game or whatever. Like, I just whatever they thought they were going to achieve there, with the risk reward really kind of tilted in their favor. But yeah, that's a 3.
Okay. Yeah, it's a really bad version of that game. And then Street Fighter 2, which looks better than Killer Instinct, but is also a really bad version of that game.
Yeah, maybe a 4 for Street Fighter. I like Street Fighter, better fundamentally. It does look a bit better, but it still must be just sad.
Adventures of Lolo.
Yeah, so this is like Hal's like pre-Kirby thing, kind of coming into play again. But I've never really had any experience with this. So yeah, I don't know how sort of how enjoyable it was or not, but yeah, it's just kind of interesting that after
It's alright.
coming after Kirby, and I guess like Lolo isn't like was it Lolo is in Kirby some of the Kirby games like they added like to fit in with like Diddy and all the other like triple
Yes.
things in Kirby, but. Yeah, not a great deal to go on with this, so I'm struggling a little bit, but maybe a 6.
Lucal.
You were talking about struggling. This I really
Go Google it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, aren't I? And just I mean, it's not even bloody word, is it?
Yeah, did you mean Lucille?
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not really gonna go along with it when you search for this.
No, it
But
doesn't have a Wikipedia page.
I have a box art, Victor
Uh-huh.
Kai. Yeah, that is somewhere in the world, and that looks exciting. I wonder what possessed them to pick
Just look
this
at
up.
these screenshots.
Intergalactic space shuttle in search of alien life. Its latest task is to explore the newly discovered planet Hexalexon. I don't know what to make of this. Challenge the clock through a labyrinth of 30 action-packed brain-teasing levels. Yeah, what a weird thing that is. Distributed by Victor Caillou. I'll give it 5. I'm just pretty baffled, but what else can you say to that? Oh, and also, you know what? Kirby's Dream Land 2, give it an 8. I'm going to bump that up to
Because after looking at all of the other Game Boy games from the year.
Yeah, exactly. It's you know, it deserves more separation than that. And so yeah.
That's fair. Okay, so that's our 1995. Moving on to 96. Oh, you thought that anything interesting was going to happen. Joke's on you, it's Europe.
There's no N64. Either I was playing N64 in 1996, but didn't. I believe it was March of '97 that it.
No N64, no Pokemon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Pokemon, was a little later.
3 years away in Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, because Pokemon was 98 in America. Pokemon is 99 in Europe. Yeah.
It's what did they fill this year up with? And I guess it's not again, because I mean, at this point, obviously, Super Nintendo in Europe was never as popular as it was in the US. Certainly not as popular as it was in Japan. And then you had the fact that stuff like Saturn and PlayStation had really been gaining traction. So it was kind of getting squeezed on all sides a bit, in terms of it never had the same market share over Mega Drive that it had elsewhere. But now you had these newer machines were starting, because I don't know if the Saturn was ever a big, like a massive deal in Europe, because certainly like PlayStation was just way bigger. But because of the following that Sega had enjoyed through the previous two, it certainly was not irrelevant. It was a significant player, and PlayStation ended up being huge. So yeah, this is like Nintendo in sort of like almost like hibernation in Europe. You know what I mean? It's just like, what the hell? But let's see. So we'll start. Yeah, Tetris Attack. So yeah, I've not played this particular version. I've played a couple of adjacent versions. The Game Boy version of it with the Yoshi kind of trappings is on the Virtual Console in Japan, because like it was called like Tetris Attack. It was just like Yoshi's Panapon or whatever.
Yep.
So I played that, and of course I played Panel de Pon, the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom game before it got reskinned on NSO, and it is very, very good. I mean, I played other versions of Puzzle League too, so I wouldn't say it's like absolutely hits me as hard as in terms of just the basic puzzle format as it hits some people, but it's very solid, and this is a pretty good version, so I think an 8.
Okay. DKC 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble.
Yeah, well, I said I was well onto the N64 by the time this was happening, which they sort of reference in the game, don't they? There's a place you can go where someone is playing an N64 and it has like a slightly reworked version of the Peach's Castle theme, like playing and stuff. So it kind of knew that it was it was kind of a bit old hat at this point, but they put another one out, and there's some interesting elements to it and stuff. But it doesn't have. It's still, obviously, as we sort of discussed with DKC2. Still doesn't have the impact, obviously, that the first one had. It's another sequel another year on, but it isn't necessarily as kind of tightly put together as DKC2 either. So I think perhaps a 7 is appropriate here.
Okay. Winter Gold.
Winter Gold. So I'm assuming this is like an unlicensed Winter Olympics game. I mean, that's the only possible justification I can arrive at for such a name. It's like, well, you know, it's like the Winter Olympics, and we can't actually call it that. It's Winter Gold, yes. So I have no idea if it was any good at all.
It was developed by Funcom. It was a European exclusive.
Nice.
It was made. It looks like it's an FX chip game. It was originally called FX Skiing, and they wanted to make an official Winter Olympic title, but that didn't happen. So here we go.
Yeah, Winter Gold. Bloody hell, it's passed me by. I mean, I'm certainly interested in like FX chip games.
It was FX2.
Yeah, because it's like it was the one that I always remember that wasn't like Nintendo, that got quite a lot of coverage was Vortex, like with the transforming like robot. It had like a bunch of different modes. Like,
oh my gosh, you should look up screenshots of this.
Yeah, it looks like surprisingly kind of sophisticated.
Yeah, what the fuck?
I really don't know what to make of
I
it.
had never heard of this game before I put it on this list because Nintendo of Europe put it out. What the fuck? Maybe I should go track down a way to play this.
It is very interesting, I guess, is what you could say. I have no idea how well it would play.
It says that it gave praise to the presentation, fast pacing, graphics, and techno-style soundtrack and controls. Some felt mixed on gameplay and sound design, and the detractors were lack of replay value, limited color palette, and letterboxed resolution. Spoilers, it's a European game.
Well, and also it's an FX game. I mean, so a lot of the FX games had the letterbox, didn't they?
Yes.
Before, and then obviously, like if the PAL would like squish the letterbox down,
yep.
So it was even smaller.
Yeah, just a great invention.
I feel like maybe this has some connection to the people that did that Vortex, but whereas that I could very much remember it being covered and being reviewed, and people liked it. And thought it was impressive. Apparently, it was really quite difficult. The techno soundtrack, like in both cases. Now, admittedly, I mean, if anything was coming out of Europe at the time, there was a half a chance, or possibly more, that it would be with a techno-ish soundtrack. But I'm just gonna have to go with a 6 on this one. It's kind of hard to. You can't argue. It looks interesting.
Yeah.
But in terms of the experience, that's kind of very much we're in the dark there.
Maui Mallard in Cold Shadow.
Yeah, I heard the name over the years. I mean, like, and somebody requested something from this in the soundtrack once. I don't know whether I ever did. I get around to using it or not? I think it was MASB that requested something from this once upon a time, and I also may have been on Radio Trivia, so it's something I'm kind of aware of. And of course, there was a kind of tradition of these kind of duck games being somewhat a decent sort of lineage of games that were certainly kind of more more substance than your sort of typical kind of licensed Drek. But I'm not particularly familiar with how this one was meant to sort of stand out from the pack. Tough to score on that basis. But I'll go with the 7.
Okay. Disney's Pinocchio.
Okay, so would this have been a Capcom game like originally, or what's it? Because they obviously did so many Disney games in this time period, but we'll have to look this up because it's just not. There's nothing really ringing a bell for me.
Virgin Interactive.
Oh well, yeah, of course they also because they were the other like was it Aladdin, whereas like
Yep.
there's Capcom Aladdin and the Virgin Aladdin. Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. It is a puzzle platformer.
Yeah. So.
Sega put it out on Genesis, and Nintendo put it out on Super Nintendo.
Huh.
It was a double first-party published game.
What a strange thing. I guess just the power of Disney and. and all
I mean, but of all properties, this is the one that Disney at the time was like, "Fuck it, we'll try VHS with a title we don't care about. Let's give him Pinocchio."
Yeah, sure. Because it was very different back in terms of how available their stuff was.
Yeah, like
I think it contributed to the fact that I never really saw much of it. Like that as a kid, I didn't see Disney films in the cinema, but then like there just wasn't really, like you wouldn't see them at home either. So it was just like a lot.
oh, must have been a very dramatic last 15 years for you then when they started taking over the world.
Yeah, it's just like no, it's everything now. Avoid this, dickhead.
Yes.
That's-
It's like, oh, a world, or you grew up in a world where you got to avoid Disney. Not anymore.
Yeah, that's a luxury, it turns out. So yeah, the Virgin Interactive stuff didn't sound necessarily like my cup of tea, but it's difficult to be sure. But a 5, I think, with this.
Okay. Whoa! I actually gave it a 55. That would have dramatically skewed the rankings. Secret of Evermore.
Yeah, so this got quite a lot of coverage. I guess it could have made sense because Nintendo had brought over Secret of Mana. Like they bring this over, and it would get a lot of attention. But obviously, in the magazines that I was reading, it was kind of some of it was in opposition to the fact that it's like, there's like an actual sequel to Secret of Mana, which is not coming to anywhere in the West, and there's stuff like Chrono Trigger that's not coming to the West. It was tough on Secret of Evermore as like something that was coming to Europe versus all these things that weren't, that were generally like better perceived. So it did feel like it got maybe a little bit of a bum rap, but in terms of how good its qualities actually were, divorced from all that, it's hard to be sure. And it hasn't had re-releases and things for me to sort of test. So I'll give it a 7. Probably 6.5 would probably be right, maybe, but we'll go 7.
Toy Story.
Yeah, this got loads of coverage.
I bet.
Toy Story was huge, obviously, and like the pre-rendered graphics and all that.
And we were still 5 years away from the PS2 that could run it in real time.
It was one of those things though, where it's just like, even like then, I suppose some people who weren't caught up in just like, it's like a new way of drawing sprites, like we might have sort of been a bit down on the kind of plasticky look of the kind of pre-rendered thing. But for Toy Story, it's perfect. It is sort of approximated what it actually looks like. In terms of the film and just the fact that they are toys and everything, like aesthetically, it's a good match, and it did review well. But I never played it, so it's hard to say. So maybe a 7.
Okay. Terranigma.
Right, so
Time to be jealous.
Yeah, this is the one that actually came out in Europe that didn't come out elsewhere, or in America. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, this is everywhere but America.
Yeah, that's a strange one when you consider the just some of the massive games, that weren't brought over by NOE or anybody else. Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 3/6. This actually did get to come over. And I've certainly heard of good things, but again, it hasn't had the re-release history for me to kind of go back and test it. So I'll kind of go with an 8 on this one. Just kind of having to hedge my bets a little bit without having to being able to play it.
Street Fighter Alpha 2 for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, they're sort of stepping in for Capcom again. This has been a pattern, especially when, kind of a system is a bit past its prime. And this, by all accounts, is kind of remarkable in how it actually, gets anywhere close to Street Fighter Alpha 2 with the Super Nintendo hardware and having a cram like stuff down into that cartridge size and all this sort of stuff. So I think it's everything I've ever seen is sort of technically kind of impressive and remarkable, and obviously Street Fighter Alpha 2 itself is a very well regarded entry in the kind of series, but it's still kind of limited, and not the full experience. So a 7.
Okay, Kirby's Block Ball.
Yeah, so I think we mentioned this in a previous episode with Pinball Land. It's kind of weird that I kind of find it weird that the Breakout Kirby came after Pinball Kirby in a way, because I don't know. The Breakout feels like something you do early in general. There's this weird relationship between Breakout and video. For whatever reason, they're like tied together. A lot of early video game pinball things have like breakout elements to them, but Kirby's Block Ball is, again, it is very much kind of the Pinball Land sort of treatment for this, in terms of it's really thoroughly embellished with Kirby stuff and all that. So it pretty much executes the premise, as well as you could hope for. So I think I think a 7 is appropriate.
Okay. What about Tetris Attack for the Game Boy, black and white?
Yeah, so I've pretty much played this, the Japanese version, just without the literal Tetris Attack name. And, obviously there's a limitation with the fact that it is, the colour being taken out of it is not great for this kind of thing, matching, tiles colour, but it's still pretty playable, and, it's still got some, kind of very cute kind of art that they managed to downsample from the full version and all that sort of stuff. So I think a 7 as well for that.
GX is asking about when there's going to be a Kirby Soccer, and that sounds very violent, because Kirby would be the ball.
Yeah. Exactly, Kirby's just getting... But the thing is with Kirby is that we know he could take it, because he can take anything. It's like, you wouldn't be worried about him, because
I guess.
He could take anything, and if any of the players really got out of line, he could just like devour the stadium at like a moment's notice.
Yes,
so.
This is a very weird year because they've put out very little, and this is probably going to be our highest average. Donkey Kong Land 2.
Yeah, well, again, everything I think is basically in play, that we talked about with the first one. It's just kind of trying to cash in. So I think it's a 4 again.
Okay.
I can't really see what's sort of redeeming in that sense.
And then Tetris Blast.
Tetris Blast. All right. The name rings a bell, but especially with how sort of prolific they were in just calling things Tetris when that was not necessarily appropriate.
Is it a puzzle game? If yes, is it a Yoshi game or a Tetris game?
This version of Bomb Bliss. So there we go. It's known as Super Bomb Bliss in Japan. Yeah, so I can't say as I'm familiar with Bomb Bliss myself. They're not exactly in a position to comment on it very firmly, but I'll just go with a 5. But they were just absolutely shameless.
Yep.
Just putting Tetris on everything.
All right, 97. First game, Kirby Fun Pack.
Kirby Superstar with a different name. Interesting name. But yeah, I played Kirby Superstar again. That was kind of when I started to play more Kirby games. going back to them, and I think it was one of the first ones I played some of, actually, even before I played the one on Wii, because it has got a really good reputation, and it's certainly visually, the sound and all that is really, presentation all round is really quite strong. There is a certain amount of variety with the sort of different kind of constituent games and stuff. You go from things that are kind of like straight remake of previous Kirby stuff, but prettier, to this kind of more non-linear brand of Kirby. I think it kind of works that to some extent, because I think when you actually like hem Kirby in a bit, like in like caverns and things, like his move set takes on a somewhat different kind of different connotations. So it's just like, well, now you can't just float over everything and all that. You can actually sort of hem it in and give him some structure. So I like it. I don't know whether I'd say it's my favorite Kirby game though, even though it's got some real strengths. So I think an 8.
Okay. Space Invaders.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how different this would have been from the one that was basically in the Game Boy cartridge that we talked about. That was in a Super.
Except this time it's a full price Super Nintendo game.
Yeah, so I mean,
it's end of life for the system.
Yeah, I guess it is. It's just like, well, if we got something we can put out, okay, we'll put it out, whether we should or not. But yeah, that's I like Space Invaders fundamentally, but yeah, it seems pretty damn thin to be doing that at this stage. So I think a 4.
What about Arkanoid? Do it again.
Do it again. We're in this sort of again. Where it's a bit like the previous year with the Game Boy. It's like classic arcade. Anyone?
Yeah, no. This is Do, the antagonist of Arkanoid.
Yes.
Everyone's favorite character.
I do like it when games like that have like was it Gradius 2, like the ambition of Gopher or whatever. It's like I think I'll give a shit who I'm shooting.
So what about Arkanoid? Do it again.
About a 5.
Okay.
Fine.
All right. 50 Hertz Mario 64.
Yeah, we made it. We've made it. So I had an N64 in August, like about 6 weeks after it launched in Japan. So it was a similar length of time before it came out in America, and then it was all the way till March or something in '97 here. But so I'd been enjoying it. I'd just moved and gone to a new school and stuff. So. The best icebreaker I had was, look, I've got a video game system that's not out here yet, so do you want to see it? That's what I had, other than my boundless charm. So the eventually I did get to see the what the PAL version was like, because I knew people that went on to buy it for themselves, and it did seem pretty compromised again. We had the same conversation talking about Super Mario World. It's just like I think it's multiple facets in terms of, again, my N64 was converted for RGB SCART, so you're talking about about as good a kind of picture reproduction as you could get at the time, with the colors and the sharpness and everything, limited color bleed and all that. And then you see somebody else is playing on a PAL system, and not only is it PAL and it's bordered, but it's composite, and it just it's Mario's red hat is just bleeding into the screen, all over the place. It's like the worst color to make his hat from that point of view. It's just like completely kind of throws off the whole looking at the whole game, to be honest. So it did seem compromised to an extent, but of course, you're talking about a game that's just a huge landmark game, and I mean, when I played it in '96, just especially the first few days just kind of wrapping your head around it and you're wrapping your hands around the controller and all that stuff. It was just like, this is incredible. This is transformative, you know. But when I played the game thoroughly and got 120 stars and everything, you know, there were clear weaknesses even then in terms of, you know, that kind of ran out of steam in the back half. Some of the worlds really didn't merit having 6 stars in them. I mean, they were all a bit like thin to be, you know, to have 6, but well, plus there were 7 because of 100 coins. But you know, because some of the back worlds in particular, it was just some of them were quite duplicative of worlds you already had, or they were very kind of one note, or some of the ones that were more difficult to navigate, like TikTok Clock and Rainbow Cruise or Ride or whatever it is. They really would have been better if they didn't. It wasn't like, yeah, now go in there for another 5 stars. Like that, just they don't work well for that. I'm quite in favour of having ones that were more obstacle course like, you know, but like make them levels like the Bowser levels where you do them and that's it, they're done, you know, like you don't, you know, it's like, oh, now you get to go back in there for, you know, another star where you do a fair bit of the same stuff again and it takes time. Yeah, so it was no perfect masterpiece even then, but the impact was enormous. It was an incredible experience I'll never forget. I was so psyched for. So you've got a lot of different things, you know, kind of to balance out here. But I think even with the PAL stuff and all, and the fact that it was no perfect game by any stretch, I'll still give it a 9.
Okay. Pilot Wing 64 with Nestor.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I didn't really know who Nestor was. It sort of flew over my head at the time. For the most part, I think I don't remember contextualizing that, but yeah, years later, I remember sort of the history of Nestor being contextualized.
Oh yeah, no, this and Nestor's Funky Bowling, which is a game for a platform that Europe never got.
Yeah, exactly.
It was dead by the time Europe would have brought it over anyway.
No, in those days, yeah, that was the time where the whole gap of like we can afford to not bring it over straight away. That's where it paid dividends, wasn't it? Because it's like, no, this is a dog. We can't, you know.
Yes.
We're not going to do it. Yeah, like this is one of the games, one of the N64. I did have it. I didn't have it at launch. I had just had Super Mario 64 at launch because it was having the system eye-wateringly expensive.
Yeah.
6 weeks after launch in Japan, I mean, you know, my parents were very generous, you know, to have the system, RGB, SCART converted, you know, all that stuff. So it was one game, but then my father actually went on a business trip to Japan at the end of '96. So he was able to bring me back a couple of games without, you know, but obviously still quite, you know, because they were quite a lot in the end.
Yes,
games.
but you're not playing the surcharge.
Yeah, all the extras and all that, you know. So I think it was Pilot Wings and Wave Race for Christmas that year, and you know, I enjoyed them both. I mean, I haven't replayed Wave Race very much over the years, but I quite look forward to seeing what that's like on the expansion pack. Because, like, with Sin and Punishment, like, the slowdown is so gone.
Yes.
I'm kind of thinking, like, Wave Race without slowdown could be pretty kick-ass. Like, that is, like, something I'm really quite interested in. But Pilot Wings, first of all, it just doesn't get re-released. Like, and we've at this point, I don't know whether we've got any reason to believe that's going to change for the expansion pack.
They've not said anything.
But, you know, so all I've got to go on is what I remember back then. And as we covered, you know, a few years prior to this, I hadn't played the original Pilot Wings for context at this point. It was something that looked cool, but I wouldn't get round to it to the Virtual Console era. So, you know, just kind of went into this not having really played flight sims or any of that kind of thing. So I think there was definite novelty. And of course, the game was predicated on novelty to a fair extent. It's just, as a lot of early N64 games were, it's just like, oh, it's real time polygonal 3D, you know, do stuff, you know, and that, for me at that time, I mean, I played Mario 64, so that took some of that away, but still, it was different. We were doing it in a different environment, different, various different kind of, a lot of the same concepts as the Super Nintendo game, but just done in real time, and so it could be kind of more robust. So I liked it, and I just don't really have a good handle on how well it was held up, because a game like this that's kind of a bit tech demo-y and they sometimes don't hold up the best, do they? So
Not usually.
I think a 7, but
Okay.
it's difficult. It's a little bit of a kind of guess.
And then Wave Race.
Yeah, Wave Race, I think an 8. I think, like I said, I did play it, probably played it more of the two at the time, played it a little bit more since, and, I do think, again, there's still an element of like, I'm not how entirely sure am I about how this holds up, but, I think it was a really quite, kind of solidly designed race around. Obviously, a lot of the appeal was the novelty of the robustness of the water physics, which is something that you're gonna lose. The water physics is not such a big deal.
Yes.
But I think because the track design, the handling stuff, especially the one real downside performance was tough, and you could do 2-player, but again, I think that the performance was pretty kind of tough in that as well. So it wasn't such a split screen kind of candidate as Mario Kart was. I think that kind of handled it better, was able to replicate it better. But I think an 8's fair.
Okay. Killer Instinct Gold at 50 hertz.
Yeah, I don't recall this being discussed as the disaster that the PAL Super Nintendo Killer Instinct was, but that may just be because I really didn't pay it much mind. It was kind of like, look, I had Super Nintendo Killer Instinct, the North American one. I quite enjoyed it. I'm quite satisfied for a while. Obviously Killer Instinct Gold was mostly Killer Instinct 2, and I guess it just, added some stuff and, kind of obviously made some tweaks for running it on N64 as opposed to in the arcade and stuff. But yeah, I was kind of like, I've played plenty of one-on-one fighting games for a while. This is not something, even other series or whatever, it wasn't something I would have been desperately interested in, and it didn't review that well. I don't know if that was just fatigue with the genre, Killer Instinct itself, Rare. I don't think it was, or just the fact that it was a game that didn't really seem that well suited for N64, which is kind of ironic when you think of like Killer Instinct being a flagship for Project Reality in the arcades and all that. But where's the N64? The controller and everything, it was all set up for playing 3D games like Mario 64, Pilot Wings, and the button layout and the D-pad and everything. And then a one-on-one fighting game, even if it's got like fancy camera angles and stuff, like it just wasn't. It wasn't really a fit. So I'll give it a 6.
Okay. Star Wars: Shadows of the Empire.
Yeah, lots of coverage, lots of coverage. I think they led with this pretty hard with the marketing when it did eventually, when it came out in Europe, the launch of the system in March of '97 or whenever it was. And I like Star Wars a lot, but I had like Super Star Wars on Super Famicom, which I did enjoy. But equally, I think it did leave me a little bit like, about future. Like, it's like, well, I like Star Wars, I like video games, but I don't know whether it's, maybe it's best to leave them apart sometimes. The especially when importing games was expensive and all that. It just feel like maybe they weren't gonna, be ultimately worth the price tag. Like it'd be too predicated on the appeal being, but it's Star Wars, you know. So I didn't really seriously consider getting this, but it had like mixed reviews that I can recall. You know, it was like there was definitely some praise, but there was also some stuff that was kind of wonky. And like it was a bit of a mixed mode kind of game, right? Like it's like, you know, it wasn't one
Yep.
kind of gameplay, which I mean, you know, to this day, I suppose I'm sure it's still true, but certainly in those days, it felt like it was quite difficult for games to be kind of multimodal like that and actually be good consistently. It was
Yes.
usually going to be like a weaker mode, or they might all be weaker because they hadn't had the kind of polish, you know, and refinement that they might have liked. So a 6, I think, for this. I think, you know, I'm sure if I'd been able to play it at the time, I would have got a kick out of, you know, seeing the Battle of Hoth recreated, which little did I know I would have many more opportunities.
Yes. Yes. You're not gonna run out of opportunities. God, I'm just impressed that episode 9 managed to not go back to Hoth. Like with what that movie was.
I did well. Yeah, I don't disagree with you because it was like let's just rehash everything we possibly can in
In
2
one
hours
movie?
or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do. Oh, the obviously the previous one where they have to point out that it's definitely not Hoth.
Yes, it's salt.
Instead of, oh, that is incredible. I do love that.
Like I do like that like red under white like visual.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, when it gets going, like it's really striking, like that.
But yeah, like I will stand by that is the one movie of the trilogy I like. But also, fuck yeah, that's just like, don't worry, I know this is the second movie of the trilogy, and we're on an all-white planet. It's not snow.
well, especially because the whole thing was like, oh, we're in an old, disused base. Like,
Yes.
they did kind of need to tell people, even though like they did make it was like we're going to the mineral planet, great, and all like they did spell it out ahead of time. But I do kind of get why they felt the need to do it, but it's still just like I was giggling. I was very, you know, it's no bad thing to giggle. You know?
Yes. Mario Kart 64 at 50 hertz.
Yeah, so like I had not played Super Mario Kart, and then Mario Kart 64, which I believe came out at the end of the year in Japan at the end of '96. So it was kind of, but it wasn't going to work out in terms of like the timing of when my dad was going to Japan or anything. So that wasn't going to be my Christmas game. But it was like, okay, will it be like the next, you know, few, however many months down the line, will it be the next game I get? And ultimately, I passed, and you know. At this point, I didn't, like I said, I was in a new town, new school, didn't really have like some sort of regular group of friends to play with or anything. So that kind of, you know, diminished the appeal because that seemed to be what people thought was best about it. Oftentimes, there was a lot of review. Well, I say a lot of. I mean, how many did I read? Probably 2 or 3. You know, but it's a sentiment I picked up in, and that was a lot of reviews back then. I mean, I was doing my due diligence. But there was a fair bit of like, you know, it's not as good as Super though. Is it kind of like it's
Uh-oh.
probably like some things about it better, you know, like people like some of the reviewers like the coins better. You know, the fact that you could collect coins in Super that affected your top speed, or they liked how the items blocks worked better, and this, that, and the other. So it was just kind of like, well, you know, if these people that really like Mario Kart are kind of being a bit underwhelmed, I don't know where, and I don't even know how much I like Mario Kart. I don't even know, you know, I like F-Zero, I like a really fast race, I like Wave Race, which is a more realistic race. But this kind of cartoony, slower one, I don't know. So I passed, and I've just been played it a fair bit recently with the expansion pack, but I also did eventually, you know, years later, play some with other people that had, you know, PAL and stuff, and it seemed, you know, pretty fun. Chances are, if I'd gambled and got it back then, I would have liked it. It just didn't. I was conservative and it didn't happen. So I think a 7, especially with it being the PAL version. It could be an 8, but a 7.
Mm-hmm. Blast Core.
Oh, I had this one. I had the American version in the summer of '97.
Oh, the American version.
Yeah. So
okay. This had slowdown in Europe.
This was an issue because it's such a time trial based game at various points as well. So I think the PAL. What's the proper antonym for premium?
Discount. Value? Yeah, discount.
the PAL discount. The bit we're going to shave off the score here is probably for PAL reasons is probably going to come into play. Really did like this. I like the kind of varied nature of the gameplay. The fact that it could kind of go from action, racing, puzzle, all these kind of different elements. Just visually, you're going from driving, kind of these kind of giant mech robot type things and all this to driving a little some sort of weird bike thing that shoots missiles. It's just so strange kinds of things. And you could eventually, I mentioned this at RFN recently, you go to space just cause they fancy doing low gravity levels. There's plenty of creativity, plenty of variety. But yeah, it probably would get penalised a little bit. So I think a 7 again.
Star Fox 64 50 Hertz.
Yeah, again, it's coming into play. All right, so I had this for my birthday in 1997, the Japanese version on this occasion, which meant I didn't have all the joys of doing barrel rolls and the various other meme-ified dialogue.
Yes.
But
64 really is a victim of 50 Hertz, really. Because it's already a slowed down heavy system.
This is a game that I don't think I saw because people didn't have it. People had.
Sorry. Did they have Lilac Wars, which I forgot was the name?
Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, they're quite right. Yeah, I would have forgot that as well. But it's well remembered. Yes, it was called because what we may have covered before. I'm not sure. Yeah, Star Fox for Super Nintendo was Star Wing. The UK anyway. I don't know whether that varied at all across the continent, but so evidently there was some reason that Star Fox was
probably the Marvel character.
Yeah, I really am not. I've never, at least I've not retained a definitive account of what exactly meant that they wouldn't call it Star Fox. But of course they could have just said, well, it's Star Wing 64 then. But they didn't. They said, well, it's Lilac Wars. So yeah, that was
love to sabotage my own brand identity.
Yeah, very, very strange on that because I think like I said, they marketed the shit out of Star Wing. I felt they really gave that a big push in the UK relative to some of the other games. It seemed like anyway. So you'd think you might just want to. It was only a few years earlier. You'd want to kind of try and retain something there, but they didn't. But yeah, like I said, because this wasn't something that other people had, I've never really got to see how compromised it was relative to my version so much. But
it is on expansion pack if you want to go play the Lilac Wars version.
Because it has got the voices and the text and everything. That is a version that they've included the 50 hertz take in that. So I could have a look at some point, but. Yeah, I dearly love Star Fox 64. Enjoyed it very much, even though initially when I first played it the first time through on the easy route, I did think, bloody hell, that was over way quicker than the original Star Fox. Is this too easy or whatever? But when you drill into it, the harder route, the different kind of secret exit type stuff that's going on, the medals, and then you've got the harder mode where Fox is wearing his dad's shades or whatever. There's in the end there was enough meat on the bone there for me, but it did that initial kind of thing. I was a little bit worried, but yeah. So I think it's kind of probably be a 9, but it's gonna have to be an 8.
Okay.
For the power reasons.
GoldenEye 007 50 Hertz.
Yeah, so this is the exact opposite of the lineup was things in terms of I ended up knowing plenty of people that had Goldeneye.
Oh yeah.
Goldeneye blew up pretty big, and certainly I had again the North American version, and this was something that this is really when it kind of I ended up actually developing, like people would come and play it. We'd have like 4-player gatherings with Goldeneye, so it was a big deal, especially the multiplayer. But I enjoyed the single player too, even though I was pretty sort of initiated when it came to first-person shooters in general, which in some ways might have been helpful because obviously it controlled and played quite.
You didn't have any like previous like bias, like
to say like, oh, like this isn't how a first-person play, because that can be a problem. Like,
I wish that weren't me. I wish my background on that was Doom.
Yeah.
And then come into this, and I'm like, what? No.
It's really quite different. Although I love the breadth of control options they put in, like the fact you plug in 2 controllers and both with 1 controller each.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's an interesting option. I've no idea how practical that was, but I just like the fact that they actually kind of thought to do that. But yeah, it was heavily designed around playing it the one way, with analog stick it's moving, and like the C buttons would aim, and then there would be a copious amount of auto aim going on.
Yep.
So that's how they kind of worked it. So, well, for the multiplayer japes and all that sort of stuff, it's kind of unforgettable stuff. I don't know whether the single player has probably aged not that well. I have not played it in a long time, but it was kind of progressive, I guess, for first person games in terms of like the kind of mission objective style and all that. It much more so than just being another, as was the parlance back then, a Doom clone. Where it's just like, oh well, you go through corridors and kill stuff. It would, there was stealth, there was other elements at play. Like getting particular items or things to switch off, or all these kind of mission objectives. So I think there's some things in there that sort of stand up okay, but with the PAL stuff and all that, I think an 8 is appropriate.
Diddy Kong Racing, same year as Mario Kart 64.
Yeah, in Europe anyway.
Yep.
But I didn't play this until a little bit later. I think I did get it. But maybe it was a little bit after release, because again, like the games didn't come along that often with the importing stuff. So sometimes it would just happen to be when they were like fresh out, and sometimes it was a bit later. But in this case, I did end up getting it mostly because I think the review sold me on the notion that like the single player was relatively robust. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like, if the multiplayer doesn't work out, like people don't like it, well, I've got something to fall back on, because it's like, it's got this kind of story is probably overselling it. But,
campaign.
It's like bosses and trials, and it's not just a bunch of cups kind of thing. So obviously just reusing tracks and remixing them a bit and doing it, but also the fact that like the characters, this is the kind of thing that carried a bit of weight back then. It's like, oh well, the characters are actually polygonal, whereas like in Mario 64 they were just the kind of pre-rendered sprites going around polygonal tracks, and you get different vehicles with the airplane and the hovercraft, and it just seemed like this is more substantial than Mario Kart 64. Whether it's better or not, I mean, it's I probably still couldn't tell you, mainly because I didn't play Mario Kart 64 back then, but I have played it now, and I did play Diddy Kong back then, but I haven't played it for ages. They're a bit sort of incommensurable, those experiences, but I think an 8 would probably go with that for this as well. I did enjoy it.
Sounds good. What about Mischief Makers?
Yeah, didn't get around to playing this until many years later, because I was not yet a convert to the ways of treasure I think at this time I'd heard about them. I had a friend of mine from where I used to live before the N64 era, who was very much a Sega person. Like I became aware of Treasure through him because he had played their games. They had Mega Drive and then Saturn, and especially on Saturn, I think got into Treasure stuff. And so I'd heard of them and also read, that they had this sort of reputation for cool action games and stuff. But the reviews were a little bit lukewarm, and it just didn't sell me that this was something worth, paying a lot of money and kind of using up one of your asks on. But years later, I got a cartridge, a Japanese cartridge, because it was, I think it was Enix in Japan, wasn't it? I want to say. But Nintendo published it in the US and Europe, and I did quite enjoy it. I mean, visually, the pre-rendered kind of it's not the most attractive.
Doesn't
game.
hold up that well.
It's kind of like Treasure's pixel art on the Mega Drive games has aged much better. Even though it was from a few years earlier, but kind of. The gameplay and stuff, I remember quite enjoying it a bit by the end. Like, I wouldn't say it's kind of like the platonic ideal of like, you think of Treasure, what comes to mind as like the first and to some extent like your preferred sort of brand of their kind of action game, and it probably is going to be something more like Gunstar Heroes for me than it is this, but I still enjoyed it. Glad to have it, and hope it shows up again someday because it hasn't. I don't know how much it being like an Enix game in Japan is
Yeah, well,
we've touched on that, haven't we?
Nintendo and Enix game.
Yeah, it's not necessarily that some of these games don't necessarily get re-released that often, but I think another 8 for this one.
Bomberman 64.
No experience with this. Again, kind of enjoyed, aware of Bomberman, liked it, but didn't particularly seem like it was that warmly received. I remember reading a great deal of coverage, people loving Saturn Bomberman in the mid-90s, but this was somewhat different. How much? There's a few Bomberman games on N64, isn't there? Is one of them more like story-driven or something?
Yeah, that's not this one, I think.
Yeah, so maybe but this might be one that's literally called Bomberman Story
or like Bomberman Hero, I think.
Yeah, that's it. So, yeah, but this one it seemed like it was kind of for the people in. Of course, like Bomberman's great. It always struck me Bomberman as one of these things that probably does review well. To some extent, because like being somebody who worked at a magazine is like the best use case for Bomberman.
Oh yeah,
like it's just such a great like office game. So it always struck me like, yeah, they like it, but would I like am I going to get that out of it? Probably not. But even they were kind of lukewarm on this, so I think maybe a 5.
Okay, on to Game Boy. That's a lot of N64.
Yeah, well, it's all the launch stuff and then some, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Wave Race.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's always like this trivia thing that Wave Race, there is a Game Boy Wave Race, but I have no idea how good it is or, what.
It's very... It is like a Game Jam challenge of a demake of Wave Race 64. It's fine.
That's interesting that it is that close because, of course, like Wave Race 64 itself, like went through a lot of kind of changes, didn't it? Like when they were showing Wave Race, what they called Wave Race, I think they did anyway. Early on, like some of the Space World stuff, like it was like more sci-fi, like hovercraft type, like machines and stuff. And then eventually, it's like, no, we're going to go for the kind of realistic. Jet skis, Kawasaki, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, that changed quite a bit. So it's interesting that with this, like, I don't know, was that like a moving target or something? For them to
yeah, it's a very weird game. It's a very weird game.
without a lot to go on, I think perhaps a 6 is
Yeah.
appropriate.
All right. Game and Watch Gallery, not to be confused with Game Boy Gallery.
Doesn't it seem like it's kind of more appropriate the other way around?
No. Because, so the last time it was Ball, Vermin, Flagman, Manhole, Cement Factory, which is 4 games. This time it's 5 games. This time it's 4. Manhole, again, Fire, Octopus, and Oil Panic.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've had this on Virtual Console, obviously, it's, I can't remember with this, because they had, like, different tiers of Game Boy games in terms of pricing. Basically, there's, like, the $3 and the $4. It might have been a $3 one, this.
Honestly, yeah.
So it's like $2.70 over here in pounds. So, you couldn't really argue with it for that, and I quite liked it. But yeah, as a like, I mean, look, you've got the different version. It's 4 games, but you've got the modern, the Mario version, and then the more the straight kind of conversion.
It's cute, but like also.
So it's one of those where I think it's quite fun. You take into account what it was offering for the price at the time and stuff. I think a 6.
Okay. Kirby's Star Stacker.
Ah, yeah, so the aforementioned Star Stacker. Again, I wouldn't have been too comfortable talking about whether this came out in Europe or not, but there it is, because there is a Super Famicom version of this as well. That didn't get out of anywhere, but the Game Boy version did, evidently. But this I don't think the Super Famicom version's on NSO, which is kind of surprising to me, because I think it was on Virtual Console. But no real knowledge of how well that kind of.
It's fine
as a puzzle game. Is it particularly kind of a fun kind of twist on this? There's so many that just got in on this gold rush after.
It is an average puzzle game.
So I think 5 is kind of appropriate enough.
What about Donkey Kong Land 3?
Well, so back to the same thing again, really, isn't it? Just this sort of merciless cash-in stuff. I might be being harsh on how well, I know it might be kind of fun by itself in some ways, but it's just, as a sort of creative endeavour. It seems, again, I feel, maybe they, because I know they didn't just do the same layouts, like they did amend things to try and make it more workable. So it's not like there was no creativity in that, but it's just like, this is not a thing you make for creative reasons.
No,
at all.
Like the broad differentiation is Donkey Kong Land is trying to like adapt concepts, mechanics, and stage concept, level design, but not be 1-to-1. The GBC versions are going to try to be 1-to-1, and then the GBA versions are going to be 1-to-1.
Yeah, that's right. It's like it's basically that was there's like now we can actually give you the be worse still.
Yes.
It's like, admittedly, I mean, I think another thing that always struck me, and of course you'd had the Game Boy Pocket and stuff by this sort of time, but going for approximating these rendered, pre-rendered models and this sort of detail on Game Boy without color and that screen, I just can only imagine it must have been tremendously difficult to actually sort of look at and feel like you knew what you were looking at. I just again, without having played it, especially on even if you played it on Virtual Console, you wouldn't be getting the full, experience of like how much they just would have smeared together and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's still going to be a 4 on that one.
Mole Mania.
This was a Virtual Console game that I played that kind of wasn't particularly aware of before, really. It was kind of something that really came to my attention in the Virtual Console era of just like, oh, is this kind of
Miyamoto game.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the actually it would have been AD point, right, rather than R&D4.
I'm sorry, you cut out. What?
When they... I would say it would have been EAD at this point rather than R&D4. Would it?
Yeah, should have. Well, when did Mole Mania was it first developed? It was 96. So, yeah, it would have been EAD.
Yeah, so it's that group, because they didn't do that much on Game Boy, right? Obviously you have DK94 and Link's Awakening and this, so I mean they did pretty well when they actually turned their attention to it. But yeah, this is very much it's a kind of game. It's called that was really, really popular on Game Boy, especially years before this, kind of pushing blocks, or was it other kinds of top?
Oh yeah, like Sokoban style is literally
exactly. Yeah. So which is it's a fun kind of game. It holds up very well today. It was the Monsters Expedition.
Also, Monsters Expedition and Sokoban and A Good Snowman is Hard to Build on Nintendo Switch eShop.
Sokoban is this premium wordsmithery.
Look, I'm a big fan of that because it's a Sokoban game about chemistry. So what are we going to call it? Sokoban.
That is pretty good, I gotta say. I've not played the game. But
yes, and then they're developing a Sokoban crossover sequel with Cosmic Express, Sokoban Express.
Nice.
Easy.
No, so I like this kind of game, and I think it's a pretty well executed version. Like I said, it would have been coming years after the Game Boy got flooded with this.
Oh,
kind of stuff,
yes.
But it did it presumably, having not played a lot of those directly, but presumably quite a bit better and with more personality.
Yeah, it's good.
An 8 for me.
Okay. Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball Game Boy.
Right, so this is the first that we've seen of Ken Griffey Baseball over here, but there had been a number of games.
Oh, yes.
7 elsewhere, aren't they? Because it's just there were so many, and they were developed by different people.
Yeah.
Like, Rare developed one of them, but then there were there was ones before that and after it on Super Nintendo, and then N64, and again, baseball never really has blown up over here. Hasn't had its kind of moment in the sun.
Too busy with cricket. The cricket games go on too long. You can't get to a game of baseball.
Yeah, although they've innovated with cricket over the years, like the different formats to try and make it more digestible.
Oh, you don't want to sit in a stadium for a month.
Turns out, TV as well. It's just like you're trying to sell networks on this stuff.
It's like, I'm sorry, how you're saying you can't guarantee it'll be done in a day. Oh, I can't guarantee it'll be done in a week.
Yes, so there's a T20 World Cup going on at the moment. I don't think T20, that format, 20 overs, even existed in the mid '90s. I don't know when. I'm not a big cricket fan. I will consume some occasionally. It can be quite fun. It's quite different, but yeah, baseball just like I said, NFL. Caught on to a fair extent, NBA, but not so much baseball. But I guess they felt like it was worth releasing this. No idea if this is meant to be any good. Obviously, Griffey made loads of sense as the mascot, because not only was he one of the very best young players in baseball at the time, but he played for the Mariners, who Nintendo owned at the time. So, yeah, very much like years later, of course. Ichiro Suzuki, were played for the Mariners, and I've been going down this rabbit hole of watching old Japanese commercials for video games lately, because I need to live in the past, or certainly any time that's not now. And you just get Ichiro showing up in GameCube commercials for stuff that has nothing to do with baseball.
Yes,
it's great. It's just like, buy a GameCube because Ichiro thinks it would be a good idea. It's really
hell yeah.
Funny. But yeah, I think this one is. I'm gonna have to go a 6. Nothing much to go on, but
Tetris Plus.
All right, now.
So this is not Tetris, Tetris 2, Tetris Attack, or Tetris Blast. This is Tetris Plus. They made another sequel to Tetris. That's why, like, when James was ranking, every single time there would be a Tetris blank. Oh, they made a sequel to Tetris? Yeah, no, this is the sequel to Tetris, Tetris Plus. Ignore all those previous ones.
Yeah, and I guess like one of the things about this particular kind of game, by the look of it, is that it was something that was coming like like spread across a bunch of different platforms, pretty much at the same time. So rather than some of this stuff with the kind of Nintendo, where Nintendo's just labeling everything Tetris. And this was developed by Natsume and published by Jalico. Yeah, but let's say I don't know how much you could screw up Tetris, so I don't want to go too low, but equally it's like
What the hell are you doing?
The milking and everything else.
How big could your Game Boy library be if you only played Tetris games? But you played them all.
Yeah, I said Game Boy Tetris is a match made in heaven, so there's not that low I can go, but I'll go 6 on this.
Okay. That is a 6.59. Do you want to call it here, or do you want to get one more game in on 98?
Well, let's turn the page to 98 and
all right.
A little bit.
The first one is the Super Nintendo version of Harvest Moon as the only Super Nintendo game.
Wow, again. I probably would have thought that just didn't come out at all.
No, Nintendo of Europe put out Harvest Moon.
Also, what the bloody hell is Cruising USA doing in 1998? That's like
Good question. No, we don't even have to rank these games right now. Cruising USA and Cruising World in the same year.
That's even more That's even more bizarre. I didn't even see that. That's. I am kind of impressed with the amount of stuff here. Actually,
might I direct you to row 15?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. It's Glover.
Glover.
Yeah, I remember that being covered. I remember it was the official Nintendo magazine. It's just like, it's okay, guys. Glover's coming.
Yeah. I mean, we've also got Tetrisphere on N64 and Tetris DX on Game Boy Color. In case you were worried.
Yeah, we're certainly not past that era.
No, absolutely not. We have licensed Disney games. Ken Griffey Jr., Kobe Bryant, Tetris, Harvest Moon, 2 cruising games, Harvest Moon Game Boy. Now this is true. Oh, 2 Game Boy Bomberman games in the same year.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's really weird because it's like you're kind of feeling the effects of Pokemon a little bit here, even though Pokemon hasn't showed up yet.
Yes,
because
so
the fact that Game Boy Color exists is like very much a Pokemon thing.
Oh yes, so
and like there's the fact that some of these games are actually are coming out like more third party. I think third parties were kind of some of them had pretty much been given up on Game Boy at this point.
Yeah,
you're already seeing the sort of. The shadow of Pokemon.
This is the most 1998. We've got a James Bond game, 3 Bombermans, Mickey Mouse, Wario Land, 2 Tetrises, Legend of the River King, 2 Harvest Moons. Oh my, 2 Cruisins. What a year! And with that, we will have to wait until next week to really dig into the meat and potatoes of 1998.
It's a bit imposing, I'll say.
We've got 23 games to get through on 4 different platforms.
No, it's kind of weird. Again, your input. It's weird to think of like NOE being that activist in that period because they did feel, especially like because it was before Pokemon got here, and obviously Pokemon blew up here like it blew up pretty much everywhere. In some ways, it's one of the real nadirs of Nintendo's relevance.
Oh yeah,
and yes, because like obviously you could look back at stuff like the GameCube era, was kind of lean in some ways and stuff, but there was always Pokemon. Like Pokemon kind of just like became this like underwriting guarantee of just like you have some Nintendo has some presence and relevance.
Oh yes.
Irrespective of anything else that's going on after Pokemon emerges, but because this is just before that, it's kind of like I was probably thinking, and I'm importing stuff. I'm thinking of Nintendo in the UK anyway as being like kind of just like not particularly pertinent. And that, like just oh god, PlayStation is so dominant, and or Dreamcast is coming or whatever. But they were doing stuff for even though some of those decisions are kind of baffling, like 2 cruising games and a baseball game, and fair play.
GX wants you to place a bet on how many minutes until win back tonight.
Yeah, that's the thing. When these things get going, and when you get a few, they take on a life of their own. There's a momentum to it, is there? That sadly now, even it's just like it's not even like it's that risible or anything, as far as I'm aware. It was somewhat unkindly positioned, like as like, oh well, we don't have Metal Gear, but we have this, which it's not the game's fault, is it? It's just.
But it's also a bad game.
I guess it may not be that great. I will probably test it out a bit, but it's one of these things. Like there's plenty of bad games, man. It's not like
yes,
incredibly bad or anything as far as I know.
Yes, the N64 is full of them. It turns out.
Well, it's tough, wasn't it? It was not easy to make.
Oh, of course not.
Even that was entertaining then, let alone one that could hold up to any scrutiny years later. Like it was all like a bit held together with sticky tape, relatively to like to stuff that would come later. But yeah, I do feel a bit sorry for the win back sort of run that's possibly emerging here. But they put it on there, and it's like it's Scat. Like Scat isn't like a bad isn't either. I don't think it's a bad game at all. It's one of those sort of perfectly cromulent games or whatever. But the fact that it is called Scat in that case kind of became a bit of a punchline. And like it just keeps going.
It did it to itself, unfortunately. Yeah.
It did. It's when you do like the whole like, we have like cool acronyms. Those are cool. What's a cool acronym? Or SWAT's a cool acronym. What if we just change one letter?
Yeah. What if?
Well, there's, yes, that was a letter you could change.
Yes. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week.
Yep. Same time.
Bye.
Bye.